In this video, we will talk about how to find the diagonal length of a cube. So let's say we have this cube here, and let's say we want to find the diagonal length. So the distance from this vertex to the diagonally opposite vertex all the way over here. How can we find that length? Well, we know that each side of the cube has the same length. So if we call this length, if we call this side right here x, then this side must also have a length of x. And this height right here must also be a length of x. So all the sides of the cube have the same length. And one thing that we'll notice is that the diagonal length, so from here to here, it actually forms a right triangle with this side length, this x, and the diagonal of the base. So we know that all of the interior angles of a cube are 90 degrees. So this angle right here must be 90 degrees. And what we'll find is that we have a right triangle where if we call this d the diagonal, we can use the Pythagorean theorem to find d, where we can say that x squared plus this diagonal length squared must be equal to d squared, and then we can figure out d. So you'll notice what we're missing here is this base diagonal length. How can we figure that out? Well, we have another right triangle on the base because these two sides on the base form a right triangle with this diagonal along the base, and this angle right here is also a right angle. So what we can say is x squared plus x squared must be equal to, we'll just label this c for now, must be equal to c squared according to the Pythagorean theorem. So let's figure out what c is. So we'll say x squared plus x squared is equal to c squared. And remember, we're calling the diagonal on the base, we're calling this c. So let's figure out what c is. So x squared plus x squared, that's 2x squared, is equal to c squared. To solve for c, we just need to take the square root of each side. So on this left side, we can rewrite this as the square root of 2 times the square root of x squared. And on the right-hand side, we just get the square root of c squared, which is c. So we'll notice that the square root of x squared, that's just x. So we can say root 2 times x is equal to c. So we just found this length right here, this c, and we know what this side length, that we said this would be x. And now we have everything we need to figure out what is the diagonal length. Because again, we can use the Pythagorean theorem where we say that this distance squared plus this distance squared must be equal to this distance squared, which is the hypotenuse of the triangle. So let's solve for d. So we'll say x squared plus, remember we just figured out what c was, it's the square root of 2 times x. So instead of writing c squared, we can say the square root of 2 times x, all of that squared, must be equal to d squared. So let's see what we get. So we have x squared plus, over here we can square each individual element in these parentheses. So the square root of 2 squared, that's just 2, and x squared is just x squared. And on the right hand side we still have d squared. So we get x squared plus 2x squared, that's a total of 3x squared, is equal to d squared. And to figure out what d is, we just need to take the square root of each side. So the square root of 3, we can leave it like this. And the square root of x squared, that's just x. And on the right hand side we get the square root of d squared, which is d. So the diagonal is simply equal to the square root of 3 times x, where x is the side length of the cube. So for example, let's say we're told that x is 5 centimeters. This diagonal length is simply this formula right here. So we said d, the diagonal length, is the square root of 3 times the side length, which we're told is 5. So that's our final answer. Or if we want to rewrite that, we can say 5 root 3, and we would say centimeters. So if you're given the side length of a cube, all you have to do is use this formula, the square root of 3 times the side length. That's what the diagonal is equal to.